We have Amy LaMeyer from EnteringVR and Brent Blum from Accenture and David Francis from RealWear. Sorry, I'm not talking well this morning. And the real Veena Somareddy from Neuro, Rehab, VR. I am Amy Peck. I'm the founder of EndeavorVR. And we really work with Fortune 500 companies on leveraging this technology. And much like Accenture, looking at sort of an end-to-end strategy for deploying, because this technology can touch so many business lines. And I love the fact that we have such a diverse panel to really look at the different facets of working with enterprises. So I'd love to have each of you just introduce yourselves a little bit further and talk about your companies and what you're working on.
So I'm Amy LaMeyer. I do angel investing. I do, related to the last panel, quite a bit of mentoring, both with WXR, Boost VC, and some one-on-one mentoring. Past experience was doing mergers and acquisitions for an internet-based company, but really excited about the VR, AR, and the AI space.
Hey everyone, Brent Blum. I kind of grew up in Accenture's R&D lab, Accenture Labs, and that's where I first started working with AR and specifically thinking about how will this be applied to the enterprise. And after a couple years of that, we saw that this industry was for real, it was going to be big, and so we graduated that work out of our lab and into the mainstream business. And so for about the last 5 years or so, I've been leading our AR/VR efforts now with a focus on North America. And we cover the gamut of assisted reality, augmented, and of course virtual for Fortune 500 clients and every industry on the planet.
Hi, I'm Veena. I've started working in VR in about 2012 back in college when nobody really cared about it when I was working on my research projects. But then, so I was always interested in using VR in the medical domain. So that's where it started off. And now we are creating virtual reality applications, mostly for physical therapy, concentrating on patients with stroke, traumatic brain injury. And I'm also working with the amazing Lori Lee on FutureSight.
My name is David Francis, and I am here in my capacity that we represent RealWear in Australia and New Zealand. I've been in augmented reality and now virtual reality bit as well since 2011, when I read a little article about some company called Daiquiri that wanted to be the YouTube of augmented reality. I was like, it's a big platform. And I've been full-time in it since then, working in everything from B2C, mobile AR and VR. I work closely with Zappar across to Vive-powered VR and enterprise, and then all the way through to field mobility being enabled through the RealWear HMT1.
So because this is such a diverse panel and you each have your own perspectives, I'd love for you to kind of drill down into some of the more specific experiences that you've had working with enterprise, and Amy, of course, with some of the startups that you're advising. What are some of the challenges that you find that they're facing, and then but what do you think the opportunity is for them to just kind of push through and build products that are going to be valuable in the space?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely there's an education component that everybody needs to be aware of, because with enterprises, they're not hanging out in these conferences like we are. Well, some of them, but so it's going to take a little bit to actually explain to the companies, and honestly, you need to demo and show a lot of them what the potential of augmented and virtual reality is. So just I would recommend to build that into your timeline from a sales perspective.
And Brent, again, from the other perspective.
Sure. I think we work with a lot of startups who are very focused on their technology and on their product, and rightfully so. Sort of piggybacking on your point, there's so much more to it than just having the best tech out there, and I think the expectation setting around long sales cycles and proof points and politics and all the things it takes to close an enterprise sale are some of the coaching points we work with new startups on.
Yeah.
Just to add a little bit too, I think we need to start branching out and being in more of the enterprise-based conferences versus just the VR and AR-based conferences, and starting to integrate the conversation about virtual and augmented reality in an enterprise-based conference.
That's exactly. I liken us all to a second grade soccer team. We're all just huddled around the ball, just kind of going from conference to conference, telling each other how great the technology is. And so, just to kind of riff on that a little bit, is I forced myself to do a biopharma conference, which is horrifyingly boring. No, but you know, they have no idea. You know, and you know, people were surprised. They did, you know, no understanding of the differences between AR and VR. So you were absolutely right. And I know that Accenture does a great job of bringing in enterprise to your various innovation centers, but I think we need to have a better presence out there.
I think to that point, while it's important to educate the enterprise, I think it's also important to educate this industry how to put together the business cases, how to sit in the boardroom and make the connections between the pretty cool tech that can slam a model of a piece of equipment and split it out and everything, but what does that mean for a CFO in the room, and what is that, and when is they're going to hit ROI, and how can they justify it? And you've got to find that advocate inside the enterprise, someone who not only sees the dream of AR and VR and believes it, but also has the nous and the guts to go it inside an enterprise and put themselves out there and try and forge their way to getting that company started in this space.
And Veena, I'd love to hear your perspective too, just being a pure startup and what your experience has been, and then you're in the healthcare space as well, which has its own unique challenges.
Right. First, I want to agree with Amy when she talked about going to this industry-specific conferences. The first one that we exhibited was at Startup Grind, and the second was in virtual medicine, when we everybody at virtual medicine, doctors and the therapists, understood what we were doing and saw the value proposition there. So agree with that. One, with the healthcare industry, the biggest problem is who is going to pay for this. We always are contacted by an enthusiastic doctor or a therapist who's overachieving and wants to use VR, but they do not have the financial decision to get our products in there. So that's something that we have to work with and make sure part of our package is how this will be paid and the CPT codes that you would use for insurance to pay for your products. And that's the only way to go in and actually scale.
And I know Accenture, I mean, it's again, looking at this broader picture, is very focused on sort of the systems integration piece of it, which is a big challenge, right? You've got legacy systems that these large companies, have had for years, and it's a landmine. How are you dealing with that, and how are you kind of getting over that issue?
Yeah, in some ways, XR systems aren't that different from any other new technology that's being implemented, and certainly there are unique challenges, but when it comes to just the SI part of it, like connecting in with, say, a learning management system, for example, whether you're doing it, coming out of Unity, or you're doing it with a CBT, a computer-based training program, it's not night and day. So there's just a lot of focus on sort of the best practices of system integration, and then addressing the specific XR challenges around change management and getting people used to wearing headsets and so forth. And again, back to the data, like proving that XR experiences are more valuable, they're quicker to absorb, and they're longer lasting.
Mm-hmm. And so, actually I met one of your compatriots from Accenture in the UK, and we were kind of talking about where we were with our respective clients, and we both remarked that we're kind of stuck in this POC phase, and it's really challenging because we know the data is a thing of beauty, right? We know the efficacy of this technology, but the deployments, the challenge, right? And then once we get that pilot program done, we get the data back, it all looks good. It does come down to the money, but I'd love for each of you to just opine a little bit on how are we going to push through this?
Yeah, so the other thing that I think is really valuable that we need to remember is not to sell it as, hey, there's this new great VR thing. It's what problem do you have, and how is how are we solving it so that it'll make it better? So, right, so if in the instance of training that you guys were using, right, if the problem is retention, then you go in and you say, here's a way to improve retention, and then you explain VR. So, and that's the case in healthcare, I'm sure, as well. But yeah, just think about it, again, go back to, a lot of the startups I'm seeing are, here's this great new technology, and then I say, okay, what problem is it solving? And they say, problem? I mean, and not from the entertainment perspective, but completely from the enterprise perspective. So again, remember, you're solving a problem for this enterprise. You're helping the enterprise, from a business model perspective, function better.
One of the things we've really woken up to in the last year or two is just the financial realities of the world we operate in. And a lot of the companies we work with are just like, we're trying to get our website up, we're trying to keep the lights on, like, what is this XR stuff you're talking about? And so there were times that pilots got squeezed, and just scope got trimmed, and in the process, and myself, I'm even to blame for some of this, we said, oh yeah, we'll figure out the numbers at the end, or it'll be a hit, we know it'll be a success, and then you get there and you don't have the data. You didn't set up the benchmarks in the beginning, and that then made it difficult to sell the next phase to prove what a success it was. So if I have any piece of advice on that, it sounds a little obvious, but it's just like, my God, make sure you know what you're measuring, make sure you have the baseline set up in advance, and then take the time to measure it at the end and really promote the wins that you had.
Yeah, that is very true. And the challenge is a lot of the companies don't know what data points they want. I mean, we can record everything, and the strategy that we use really is looking at their sort of existing data analytics models and their KPIs, and we try and kind of wire in, whatever those, particularly in sim and training, what the learning outcomes are, and we try and wire it into their sort of existing data collection models. But it's challenging, and there's so much data that it's hard to kind of streamline. But in Veena, so in terms of any POCs that you're working on, where are you in the spectrum of actually rolling something out?
Okay, we have created about 4 applications which are being used right now, and about 50 patients have tried it, but it was not easy to everybody start using it in the beginning. I think this is from what I've learned being around therapists for about a year, being a software engineer in a different world than the therapists are. At first, they always wanted me to be there while they're treating a patient, because they were scared. They're like, this looks really complicated. But now at this point, I don't even have to be there. I can be here, and they're very comfortable using the systems. So one is, other than the wow factor of VR, you have to actually show how this is better than what they already have, and how it's making their process more efficient, is saving their time, and they're able to treat more patients. So showing that value proposition is what is helping us get to the next level.
Great. David, what are you saying?
I guess I'll give you 2 cases and real deployments. One being in the industrial space, it's easy. It's super easy because they're measuring everything so tightly anyway. So, for example, we've just done a global deal with Honeywell, and they're now rolling out the HMT1Z1s, the intrinsically safe versions of this wearable device, into their connected plant stuff. And I've been on the show, on road shows with Honeywell, and one of the guys was saying there's a plant in New Zealand that has 6 pumps that extract fat from milk, and if one of those pumps goes down, it costs them $200 a minute. And I said, so what you're saying is, if we reduce that time by just 14 minutes, you're cash positive on one of these devices, because an expert can remotely dial in and see through the eyes of that worker and talk them through and triage the issue or talk them through the fix. They're like, yeah, 14 minutes and we're cash positive. Industrial, easy. In the VR space, we did a VR piece for Konica Minolta for a printing expo, and Japan shut it down. They wouldn't support it and said, no, VR's stupid. No one will like it in the printing industry. We're not supporting it. And Australia went out on a limb and found the money, and the Japanese executives were there, and the printers were lining up, and their minds were blown, and we shrunk them down to the size of a CMYK dot on a page and everything. They loved it. And now, off the back of that, they've found a global budget that everyone's throwing money into, and they're going to do maybe 40 big VR experiences this year. But it took Australia to go out on that limb and prove it, that advocate that I was talking about before, for it to happen. You really need that person who's willing to put their neck on the chopping block. It was a marketing manager at Conoco called Chris Galt, and he put his job on the line over it, and it's just paid dividends. So it's finding those people is critical.
That's great, and thank you, Australia. So, you know, at Endeavor, we've been sort of focusing also now, as because apparently I don't like sleep, now also from kind of these, you know, back-end sim and training, productivity, also to the consumer side of things, because obviously our clients often have, you know, they're retail or they're consumer-facing in some regard. How important is that? I mean, it seems to us that it's getting more and more important to kind of have this path to consumer and enterprise adoption go in parallel and in tandem, because consumers just don't know what this is. They're not excited about it. We haven't done a good job of inspiring them to, you know, adopt this technology. So are there any, you know, is there any work that any of you are doing on that front as well to sort of feed the enterprise side of it?
I guess I can say I've seen quite a few startups that are doing a B2B2C play. So definitely trying to enable businesses to support their consumers. So that's definitely, you know, something I'm seeing a lot of in the startup space.
I think the only point I'd make on this is that, especially a couple years ago when Google Glass came out, there was a lot of talk of like, oh, will this be like bring your own device? Will IT departments need to start figuring out how to handle smart glasses that have been consumer purchased? I don't really think that's going to be the case, but certainly, you know, the fact that you can walk into a Best Buy and buy a pretty great VR headset right now is helping the general awareness, and it's helping with that soft sort of change management side of things, that when you do put a pair of glasses on someone for the first time or hand them a tablet, you know, there's a greater acceptance. They've heard of it, they kind of get it, and they're not quite as fearful is not the right word, but it's not as new to them.
I can speak on three things. One, we've seen a lot of patients who come to the clinic want to take it home. So we have a B2C model. Also, if you want to continue your therapies at home, and right now we're not doing that just because of liability issues, and we have to figure all of that out. And then there's the B2B2C, where once insurance payouts run out, insurance only pays for about 4 to 5 treatments, and then you're on your own. So it's better for the clinics to send some of these systems home, and they can continue their therapy. And that reduces the amount of people who come back, and there is less kickback, which insurance really likes. That's one. And then if you've seen Sarah Hill's Helium app, there is a push for digital medical apps, and a push for creating this digital pharmacy so that doctors can actually prescribe this to you. So there's 3 revenue streams there.
That's great.
I think, I mean, 2013 here at AWE, pretty much like 90% of the industry pivoted across to industrial. Before that, everyone was going for sales and marketing. They're like, wait till the ad agencies get our publishing tools, they'll love it. You know, it'll be huge. The agencies, the creative directors, they didn't understand how to create for the space, and they still don't to some extent. But in the B2C space, there's a lot of stuff really, really working out there. And there's a lot of presence, and there's a lot of people in the enterprise who are seeing stuff outside and going, I just did this thing. So if you go into any 7-Eleven right now, down the road here, there's a campaign that our guys at Zappar built for Deadpool. And it's games that are unlocked every 3 or 4 days. They're gyro games, or natural feature tracking, all that sort of stuff. In the first 4 weeks of a 3-month campaign, we've had almost 2.5 million hits at an average dwell time of 2 minutes 20. I extrapolated that out, and if you were paying for 30-second YouTube pre-rolls, the media cost to Google alone would have been 1.5 million already into the campaign without creative. So this campaign has already smashed an established pre-roll YouTube platform out of the ballpark. So it's out there and it's working. And one more, I gave my business card to a guy in an insurance company, and I met with him again 2 weeks later. He said, I gave your business card to my son, who's 7, and he goes, and he saw the Zap code, and he goes, yeah, Dad, that's that thing that was on the Scooby-Doo ice cream 3 years ago. And he was blown away. He couldn't believe that brand recall. So it's working out there, and enterprise will see it and see it validated.
So we just need to set some more meetings with 7-year-olds, get some business done. So we have a couple minutes left for some questions. Actually, probably one question. One really, really solid question. Anybody? Come on, somebody's got a question out there. There we go.
Thank you very much for the panel. I have the following question. When you pitch enterprises, most of them have particular demands for features that you don't yet have. And you're pitching multiple enterprises, and each of them has different demand to some degree. So the question is, how would you balance what features do you do, what you don't, to actually make this sale happen? Thank you.
Part of it probably depends on the stage of the business that you're in, but I would say it comes down to the number of users that are going to adopt to that feature or use case, and then how reusable it is. There's some really particular things in, say, like pharma that would be hard to translate to other industries, but we've seen some platforms add like support for beacons and IoT sensors, and that, of course, was just an advancement on the roadmap. So perhaps that's the second half of my answer is like if it's already on your roadmap and people are asking for it and you see the numbers, it seems like a good play.
Yeah, I think that's about all the time we have. I really want to thank WXR Fund for inviting us all and having us here today. Follow them on Twitter, follow them on LinkedIn, get on the website, become a mentor. If you're have an incredible startup, they're just started a new cohort, but there'll be another one. It's an incredible organization, Women in XR, but everyone is welcome. It's the wave of XR. So please, please, please get involved with WXR. And thank you all.